It's Monday at noon Eastern time. That must mean it's time for Live with Kevin. And today I have Heather Holleman with me. You can see her smiling face there. I am so glad that you're here. We're going to talk today about, as you can see on the screen, interpersonal curiosity, the power of relationships. And I'm going to introduce you to Heather, and then I'm going to tell you a little story about Heather and I, and then we're going to take this wherever we take it. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about Heather. Heather Holleman is a speaker, trainer, author who loves helping develop others professionally, especially writers and speakers. People have called her a walking exclamation point, and she's known as a lover of vivid verbs and semicolons. She currently directs the advanced writing and the humanities courses at Penn State, Go Nittany Lions, and she devotes herself to building authentic writing communities and helping students gain confidence and joy in writing. She's a graduate of the University of Virginia and earned her PhD in English literature from the University of Michigan. Not so much on the Go Wolverines, everybody, just saying. She has received numerous teaching awards in the past 25 years and has written 8 books, her most recent being Sent, Living a Life That Invites Others to Jesus by Moody Publishers. She and her husband, Ashley, have 2 teen daughters and 3 cats. Her podcast is The Verb with Heather Holleman, and she blogs daily at heatherholleman.com. We'll get into all of that later, but I have to tell you a story. So welcome, Heather. Glad that you're here.
I'm so happy to be with you. This is so fun.
So here's the story, everybody. Bob Tiede is the person that got Heather and I connected. And if you don't know Bob, he's Mr. Leadership Question Guy, leadingwithquestions.com, I believe it is. And I was reading Bob's newsletter and had this really lovely, really quite wonderful set of questions that were authored by Heather. So I said to Bob, I want to meet Heather. And he said, that'd be wise. And so we chatted on the phone, and I said, I know that what you wrote about there isn't really what you do every day and isn't what you've written your books about, but I would love to talk to you about this live. Would you be interested? And she said, yes. I'm not sure why, but I'm glad that you did. But again, the reason that I tell the story, everybody, is seriously, is because if this is about the power of relationships, it is the power of my relationship with Bob and Heather's relationship with Bob that brings us together today. And so in that regard, I think that it's relevant. So Heather, welcome. I'm glad that you're here.
I'm so glad to be here. I love this topic. And so I think it'll actually be really timely for people as they enter into a holiday season. You want to connect better with people. You want to connect with family members. So this is perfect timing.
So when Heather and I were having this introductory phone, and it was phone, we weren't even on Zoom. I think we're just on the phone.
Right.
She said the phrase interpersonal curiosity. And I walked to my whiteboard right over here and wrote down interpersonal curiosity and put a box around it. And I said, that's what I want to talk to you about. And she goes, well, I'm not the expert. Someone else wrote the book, blah, blah, blah. And I said, but I want to talk to you about that. So let's start there. I guess everyone can say, well, I know both of those words, Kevin, but I don't know that I hadn't consciously heard them together before. You said it to me. I know it's a thing. I've since learned that, but talk to us about what that is. What is that?
Interpersonal curiosity is what I call probably the best professional skill a person can develop. And it is the interest that you take in other people. It's as simple as that. It's developing the art of asking people about their lives, their interests, and really believing that the people around you, the people on your teams and your classrooms and your family they're just treasures. They have expertise to offer. They have things that they know that you don't know. They're going to say things that are going to, catalyze some kind of action in you. It's about asking people really good questions and just cultivating a real, humble, teachable posture with people. And it's a skill to develop. And I train my students and I model for them what interpersonal curiosity looks like. One of the reasons I'm fascinated by it is people who are curious in this way have better mental health. They have less aggression in their lives. There's less conflict on teams. Businesses are more creative. The more research studies I read on interpersonal curiosity, I'm thinking, okay, I got to teach my children this. It's what makes marriage. Todd Cashin, one of the lead researchers on interpersonal curiosity, George Mason, he calls it the secret sauce of all relationships, interpersonal curiosity. So that's what it is. And I can tell you that I'm a learner. Even today, I was reading articles on, okay, how do we develop this? What does this look like? So it's something I add in my classrooms and into my parenting and my relationships in my neighborhood.
All right. So there's like 17 things you just said that I would like us to talk about. We won't get to all of them. But before I do that, for those of you that might just be joining us, we're glad that you're here with us live. And so if you're with us live, ask your questions, share your comments. I can see them. And if you're watching later, you can do that as well. We won't be able to respond to them, of course, but I will try to respond to them in the whatever social platform that you're on later. So if you're watching later, still comment. Let us know what you think. We'd appreciate that. So Heather, you teach writing skills at Penn State, and yet you said I'm teaching interpersonal curiosity. Now, you're not teaching writing novels, which I can immediately connect to. Oh, you want to learn about people so you can write better characters. So, like, how do you connect, or why do you choose to connect teaching this skill in your classes when the rest of us might not see the connection?
Well, one of the benefits of teaching interpersonal curiosity in whatever field you're in is it helps people move from a reactive, combative posture to a creative, joyful, brain state. Really, it's about creativity. It's about moving students from feeling too like they're ashamed, they're embarrassed. It's setting up an environment where you're like, look, we're just so curious about everyone here, and asking really good questions. And so what I found was at the beginning of every class, I would ask a question that modeled interpersonal curiosity. And what I found was students were more vulnerable in their writing. They were more authentic in their written voice. They had better ideas. They felt bonded to me. They felt bonded to each other. And I felt like this is really working. And the questions are not, deep or complicated. You can start really easy, just asking students. Like, one of my favorite questions is, because people love to talk about music and they love to talk about food, to ask a group of people, okay, I don't know anything about you guys. I want to know the first album you ever bought that you became obsessed with as a child. Like, you're in middle school, you have money, that
Back up. You are showing, you're younger than me, but you're showing your age.
Yes.
The kids in school, album, what's an album? You can't even say CD, but I know where you're headed. You're trying to get at that. You're trying to get at that. It says something about me and why me. And it's a question that will almost always lead people to say more than just name the album.
Yes, and they'll connect with each other. And anytime you can ask questions to get people to tell you the story, a story about this thing, whatever it is you're asking, you'll find it's just really joyful communication, and you can connect it to whatever you're doing in a meeting or in a classroom. But my favorite question to get people feeling accepted and honored is and I do this all the time because I go on a lot of Zoom calls where maybe I'm the speaker or maybe I'm doing a training and I don't know anyone on the call, but I want them to have that feeling of belonging. I'll say, okay, I'll introduce myself, but I just want everyone to go around, and the quickest way I can get to know you is, could everyone say their name and the question you wish I would ask you about yourself? And you will not believe people who you can tell. It's sort of like you, Kevin, I know you want people to ask about your John Deere collection.
Well, I don't know if I want them to ask, but I can certainly talk about it.
Maybe you would say that, but I was speaking to a bunch of professors that I had never met before, and I knew that they also didn't know each other, and they are only used to being asked about their academic research. But when we went around the Zoom room, you would hear professors saying, I love it when people ask me about the woodworking shop I built. And then, the man next to him will be like, wait, I'm a woodworker. When did you start your craft? Or someone will say, I love it when people ask me about growing orchids. And, it's a pause. It's a moment where you just can really learn about people, and it just changes everything. And also, people become more collaborative. If you're on a team and people are competing and they're not collaborating, some of these questions really do set the mood.
So, okay. You said you use them in class.
Mhm.
And so someone's thinking, okay, did she do that before the pandemic in an actual classroom or only on Zoom or both?
Yes. Well, I've been teaching for 25 years, and I'm actually known as the name game professor at Penn State. Students know they're going to have to answer a question every single class. And so the introverts, I say, look, this is a professional skill, how to build rapport with people quickly. So when we moved to the Zoom setting, I actually found that they were even more important. Because especially with students, they want to turn their camera off. They don't even want, they're exhausted. They don't want to be in another Zoom call. But when we transitioned to remote learning, the first question I asked, I said, okay, everyone, we all know each other's name, but I'm like, okay, say your name again for everybody. And I want you to tell the Zoom room the one thing you need in order to make your home workspace work for you. It was such a good question because then all the students are learning from each other. If
they're
you
getting best practices from each other,
yeah,
right?
the experts get to brag. The experts get to say, oh, yes, I've set up, and the people who don't know how to create a workspace are going to learn. So you can design questions that always have an outcome for whatever you're doing, classroom, business, seminar. The questions will link to some outcome that you want from that time.
Okay, so I had to put this comment up. Amy loves the John Deere tractors. Amy and I first met when she worked for John Deere, one of my dream clients. And because of Amy, they became a client for all too short of a time, but a time nonetheless. Yeah. So I'll just let that go for now and just be happy that Amy was here. And yes, Amy would be another session. So I want to ask one more question about this whole classroom and Zoom thing, because it was a list of questions that that Bob posted of yours, that
My
actually led right, your list of your favorite, which is actually led to say, I need to meet this person. So I want to ask one more thing about that. So when you do this in class, because people are now wondering, okay, that all sounds really good, Heather, but how long does that take? So just real quickly, you can't take the whole 55-minute class period or however long the class is with this, I wouldn't think. So just give us one more sort of logistical facilitation point about that.
Well, if you have under 25 students, you can easily do this in 5 to 10 minutes because it's a quick kind of, it's like
you can't let them turn.
Yes. If it's more than that, you can divide up into the breakout room if we're using Zoom. The other thing you could do is quickly build rapport on chat, the way that Amy just connected over the John Deere. You can have the chat go, and then you can say to people, if someone says something that you totally agree with, give them a shout out. But actually, I firmly believe that the benefits of the time that you take with these questions far outweigh any losses of time. So for example, if I have 25 students, we're going to take 15 minutes of a 50-minute class on this question alone. And the question is, when you enter the Zoom room, how do you add value to this session? It is a really hard professional development question because I want them to know when you're here, you're adding something. And if you can't be aware of what you're adding, then you're probably not being a good contributor. So say your name and something that you hope to add. And a way you can tweak that is you can also say, how do you add value to the Zoom room? Or maybe a variation is what changes when you enter the room. But you can also say, what do you fear changes when you enter the room? And that's when students say, my name is Sally. I hope I bring a lot of energy to the Zoom room, but I'm afraid I talk too much. And then people in the chat could be like, no, Sally, we love all your contributions. Or someone, Matt will say, I bring a lot of rational thought, but sometimes I'm afraid you guys think I'm too serious. And then people in the chat can say, no, Matt, you're great. We need you. So it's worth it to build. You're going to get a lot of benefit. It will bear much fruit the time that you give. But again, more than 25, you need to divide up your seminar. That's my cutoff. If it's more than 25, you really can't do the name game. It'll take way too much time.
And I really love that you added the chat piece because I'm often doing sessions with, 100 people, and I don't even have time to have that happen in the breakout room necessarily, but I can do things in the chat. I can even do something as they're arriving, right? Anything to get some of those same ideas. I just really, really love that. And you're cultivating interpersonal curiosity. So I want to go back to that point for a second.
Yes.
And that is, you said you want to teach it. Obviously, you've been talking about how you're modeling it, but what advice would you have for us in terms of teaching it to others beyond modeling? Not that modeling isn't super important, but what other advice would you give, or what else would you give us from a sort of a teaching us about doing it perspective, Heather?
Well, the first thing is I would want all of your listeners to remember what it felt like to have someone in your life be genuinely curious about things you care about. Remember how loved you felt. Remember how wonderful that was. And then remember a time when maybe you were on a date or when you went out with someone and you did all the talking because they would not ask you one question about yourself. Do you guys feel that? Like, I wish, I asked my daughter, I said, okay, you're in a high school with almost 1,000 people. How many of your friends actually ask about your life? And my young daughter was like, everyone is so selfish. Nobody even asks about me. Maybe one person out of 1,000. So you got to develop the conviction. I mean, I always say people are going to live their life out of their core principles. So the first step is get them understanding the value of interpersonal curiosity. The second step is to practice. I mean, and this is kind of funny. You can say, imagine how a curious person would act, and then just go inhabit that space. A curious person asks really good questions. Just pretend pretend you're curious. I mean, that's a kind of a joke, but it does work. If you're like, oh gosh, I can't even imagine doing that, or I'm an introvert, or I'm nervous. Just say, well, if you were curious, what kind of, how would you act? What kind of question would you ask? And then
let me tell you a story about that.
Go ahead.
Take an aside on that point. So I do an exercise often. I haven't done it since we've been in virtual land, but in workshops, in face-to-face. Not that I couldn't do it virtually, I just haven't had the need to, or a situation to. But I often have done a situation that's to help people work on listening skills, which we already know how to do, but we need to think about it and be conscious about it and all that stuff. And so what I'll do is, and so here's a bonus exercise for everybody. You give everybody 3 index cards and say, write down 3 things not about work that you could easily talk about for 5 minutes without any problem. Things that you're passionate about, things that you care about. Write down 3 topics, 1 per card. Everybody does that. Everyone gets a partner. Sometimes it's in trios, but assume it for a moment, it's just a partner. So you get a partner, and then I say, okay, one person gives their 3 cards to the other person. I said, okay, now you're looking at the 3 cards. Pick the one you're least interested in and hand that back. So that you have just picked the topic, and you've just said, it's the thing I care the least about among these 3 things. Now we do this, and then we have the whole exercise goes on. And here's one of the things that always happens, Heather, to your very point. I ask people when they've been consciously trying to listen, I said, how many of you found this far more interesting than you ever thought possible? And every hand goes up. So it's you don't even have to fake it. You can just say, I'm going to really listen here. And that will give you the fake that you need, if you will.
I'm going to steal that, Kevin. How did you think of that? That is a genius idea. So you write down the 3 things that you could talk about forever. You drop your least one, or you have the other person.
No. You take the listener has to pick. So you take the 3, I hand the 3 to you, and I say, okay, Heather, of the 3 cards that you have, pick the one you're least interested in. They don't know what's going to happen next.
Okay.
Hand that card back to your partner.
Okay,
partner, that's what we're going to talk about.
And then they have to listen and get excited and practice curiosity.
Well, they don't have to get excited. My point is, it naturally happens.
That's cool.
So the point, one of the things I love about the idea of interpersonal curiosity, I want to put this comment up from LinkedIn. As an introvert, I find asking questions a great tool for me to be less introverted. It's like a superpower. That's exactly right. Right? I don't have to talk about me. I can reflect on the other person. I got another good story we could get to. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. That's a super great point. So my point here is I'm just trying to help them think about listening. And the point is that comes as the natural outgrowth. And once we become curious, see, here's the thing. When we're curious, our energy goes up. When we're curious, we are naturally interested. And so if we're focusing our curiosity on another person, how can it help from building the relationship, building trust, building connection? And we need that, of course, now more than ever. Right?
Yes, and they'll bounce it back to you. I mean, and the thing about the comment from LinkedIn, even though I'm an extrovert, I've really had to keep.
Wait a minute. You are an extrovert?
Woo,
That is
yeah.
shocking.
No,
That is
I'm not.
absolutely shocking.
Yes, I'm an extrovert, but I tend to be like everyone else. This is my, I can be just as self-absorbed as the next person. So I've really had to come out of myself and be like, look, this isn't all about me. I'm not the one in the room with all the, the great ideas. So I do keep a collection, Kevin, of really good questions. And whenever I'm with someone who has an area of expertise, maybe in the world, especially of psychology or medicine, I'll say, if you could ask a question of your client, what's the best question you ask them? And so I write down and I keep a list of note cards, of really good questions. The latest one was, if people are having a really hard time, maybe something really bad has happened to them, a really loving question is, hey, I know you're having a really hard time. What thought keeps going through your head that you just can't get rid of? It's a great question if people have had trauma. I'm not trained in these things, but you can just say, yeah, I can't. And that way, if you've got students or team members who can't focus, you could say, look, I know you've been having a really hard time. What thought is going through your head you can't get out of? You can't get out of your mind. And they'll articulate it to you. And guess what? They're going to do great the rest of the meeting because they got it off their mind.
Because they can let go of it then.
No. So I didn't know that. Someone had to train me, in saying things like, don't say, how was your time in COVID-19? Nobody's going to answer that question. But if you say, okay, tell me your biggest stressor.
Oh, they will.
Yeah.
But you're gonna get unloaded on with all of the B stuff that we don't need to hear, right?
Yeah. So you just say, what was your biggest stressor? Or I love the question, what helps you stay motivated? I mean, things that people like to pass on their knowledge and expertise. We're just all so self-involved. We don't believe that other people have knowledge to give us, especially as you move up in leadership. So I really have to say, no, I am not the expert all the time. So, and you learn a lot from people. So it's a humble, teachable posture. It's character development. I love it.
So it reminds me that last week, some people that are watching this on Facebook might actually be a part of our 60-day, what we call the Remarkable Gratitude Challenge. We are now 40 some days into it, I think.
Yes.
And there's lots of stuff that's happening with it. But one of the things that's happening is each Tuesday, I give them what I call the gratitude social share, one thing to share with others externally, right? And last week I said, share 3 things you've learned from the pandemic. And that was the thing for them to share. And I wrote about that on my blog this morning. So if you go to blog.kevinikenbray.com, you'll find what my answers to that question were, like 6 of them. And it starts with the question, what are you learning, or what have you learned from the pandemic?
I love that. I'm going to go right now to read that. I love that. I love it.
Blog.kevinikenbray.com. So I'm reminded, I had no idea when we started this that the first person I would think of after we started was Jim Howe. And there's no one on this call. There's no one that's watching now or later. It's highly unlikely that anyone that would watch this would know this man, Jim Howe, who was a neighbor of ours at our farm growing up in Michigan. And I remember distinctly, I could walk you within 5 feet of where I was standing when he and I had this conversation. When Jim said he was a very successful dairy farmer, he says, Kevin, I believe I can learn something from everyone.
That's right.
And Jim Howe would never have put the words interpersonal curiosity together, not because he wasn't wise, because he never would have thought about hooking those 2 words together. But fundamentally, by having that posture, that's what he was doing. And in that moment, in that day, I think I believed that myself, but he crystallized that for me. That's why I can remember where I was. And, he was sitting in his truck and I was standing next to him outside the truck. His arm was out the window, the whole scenario. Right. And the point is that's it. Like, if we don't believe that we can, like, if you didn't think you could learn something, you wouldn't ask for that question from that person, like you just told us. Right. So it starts with a decision and a mindset, and then you're teaching us actions that we can take to go with it, which is just awesome. I
love it. No, that's right. And it honors people. It's loving. You'll have more friends and you know what to do with because people will feel loved and they'll want to spend time with you. And again, it's really good for marriage. I mean, I've been married, we're going on 21 years. And one of my favorite things I love about my husband is he's curious. He wants to know. Right after I get off this call, he'll be like, how was it? What did you learn? What was your favorite part? How did you feel? He's just really good at doing that. And same with our children, just asking them about their lives and asking questions that you can start keeping track of questions that you ask people that tend to get a really good response. Take note of how you phrased it. Again, when people say, how are you? It's not a good question. But when people say, what was a ritual you did this morning that made you feel good? That's going to open up a whole story, a whole different conversation than how are you? So take notes of questions that get a good story and help you feel connected with your friends and neighbors and husbands and,
Not only do I collect tractors, the large ones and the toy ones, I also collect questions like you do, Heather. So there you go.
Well, what's your best one? I'm so curious. Can we do a little share? We should write a book.
My favorite question is not quite in this realm. But
Okay.
My favorite question, and I asked it on a podcast that I recorded a few minutes ago. I will ask it on 2 more podcasts I'm recording this afternoon, and that is, now what?
Yeah.
So now that you've experienced Heather, now that you've heard all of this, maybe you're excited, maybe you found it interesting, all that stuff. But what are you going to do as a result? What's the next thing? What does this lead you to? Now what? That's my favorite 2-word question.
Now what? Have you written a book called Now What?
I have not yet.
That would be a good book.
And no, it's not the next one. I already know what the next one is, but I can't tell you anybody what the next one's going to be. Right? And look at this. I love Would You Rather.
Oh, those are
questions, right? Those can be light and airy, or those can also be deep, right? For sure.
Well, I love Would You Rather. That's so great. I love Would You Rather with kids. I used to walk all the neighborhood kids to school, and just to build relationships with them and the parents. It was just building our community together, and the kids would love that. But they were weird. It was like, would you rather be eaten by an octopus or slowly consumed by a vulture? And the boys would get all into it. The little boys would love,
like, thank you, but no. And someone just came onto this live at that moment, and they're like, what in the heck are they talking about? And what is Heather's expertise? That's the question.
Yeah.
That's what we'll be asking then, right? So for sure.
That's so fun.
So, I've got a couple of questions for you. I've got 3 more questions for you. Actually, I've got 4 more questions for you.
Okay.
You're working with, for many of the folks who are here, you're working with our future employees.
Yes.
What should we know about them? And I'm really hoping that you'll say something that might surprise us in a positive way. But what should we know about them?
Well, my instinct was to tell you all the things you already know. The sadness, the disappointment, the fear they've had. I mean, this is a generation that began, with 9/11. They've had a lot of pain in their lives. But that was my instinct. But really what I want to tell you is that the generation I see is resilient. They're highly self-aware. They are ready to contribute. They care deeply about impact and meaning, and they don't want to waste time. And so I think you're going to be more pleased than not. I mean, that's what I'm seeing. I teach juniors and seniors, and they're excited. They're excited to launch careers. They want to have impact, and they're really, really resilient. They've been through more, and they've had to manage more. I mean, when we were growing up, I didn't know. We read the newspaper on Sunday to figure out what was going on in the world. These kids are dealing with the onslaught of constant news and the feeling of powerlessness and the feeling of can you imagine? I mean, Kevin, can you imagine what their brains are like? I mean, I kind of knew what was happening in my neighborhood, and I never had to be camera ready. No one was taking pictures of me or canceling me if I said the wrong thing. I mean, they've grown up in cancel culture, so they're highly aware of all of their social interactions. So if you can leverage that in the company, you've got you're going to get a lot of talented students who really can add a lot. They can add a lot of value. I think you're going to love it. So I don't know. Were you hoping I'd go negative, or what's the positive?
No, I really was hoping you wouldn't go negative, because it's really easy for people my age to try to go to the negative. I didn't want that at all, although I really just wanted you to answer. So Eric put up a comment, and I want to put it up here. I just love this. And Eric, I've known this but hadn't thought about it in a while. The word listen contains the same letters as the word silent. And quite honestly, if we're silent, we have a better chance of listening, not just not talking, but not letting our head move, right? Like listening is not waiting for our chance to talk, right?
Yes.
Another comment that comes in says not either or, but rather both. Excellent point as well. Thank you, True C. So I've got a couple more questions for you before we wrap this up.
Sure.
Number one, what's one of your lessons from 2020? One.
The power of the daily walk with your family. You mean from 2020, or like one thing I'm going to bring into just the importance of having times of reflection and connection. Take a walk. I know it's simple. It's saved my life this last year, just every day walking, especially if you have teens or people that don't necessarily want to open up all the time. Taking a daily walk with someone, they'll open up. You can ask all your curious questions. So, and the power, what you mentioned about gratitude, it's huge. I'm a big believer in the power of gratitude, and neuroscience, confirms it. So having that moment in the morning of gratitude, journaling, my devotional practice is the most important part of my life every day. Is just that time in the morning, and then the daily walk.
All right. Second to last question.
Okay.
What is your advice? What is your advice for us for 2021?
To cultivate gratitude and interpersonal curiosity.
Well, that was easy. So even if it wasn't your advice, you could easily gone right back to interpersonal curiosity. So that's really awesome. So before I make some final comments, Heather, and before we sort of finish up here, there is a whole big part of your work that we haven't talked about. It wasn't sort of our focus. You've got a podcast, you've got a blog and all that. You've written 8 books. Where can people, and I mentioned it at the beginning, but say it again, where can people reach out and connect with you? How can they learn more about what you're up to at this point? Clearly, they're going to want to do that. How can they do that?
Well, my author page is heatherholleman.com, my website with Moody Publisher, all my books there. I also have my Facebook page, either the writer Heather Holleman, you'll see me there. And then I'm on Instagram and Twitter, but I'm not the best at social media. But you can always reach out, message me on Facebook, or you can also sign up to receive my daily blog. It is sort of like a gratitude blog. So I do write every day. So
HeatherHolleman.com. That goes out on but on LinkedIn, you can't see that I sent that, but there it is, HeatherHolleman.com. So I want to close by telling you all, well, first, a question for all of you. Now what? What are you going to do with this? What question did you get? What action are you going to take? Maybe you're going to say, I need to listen more. Maybe you're going to think about the questions you ask. Maybe you're going to start to collect questions. There's lots of things that you hopefully got from this. And maybe you came in late and you want to wait till it stops, is available, and you can go back and watch it from the beginning. But now what? The question is, what action will you take as a result of spending this few minutes with Heather and I? And I want to close, Heather, by telling everyone else that this woman absolutely practices what she preaches. When we got on to this platform that we use before we went live, the first thing she said, so I need to know about John Deere's. And so she didn't really want to know about John Deere's. She wanted to cultivate the connection with Kevin. And so I just want you all to know that whatever you've seen here is the real deal. And I will be forever grateful to Bob Tiede, leadingwithquestions.com, for connecting Heather and I. Thank you, Heather, very much for being here. It was a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. What an honor to be on your program. And I wish everyone happy holidays. And I really hope you can use these questions with your friends and family.
Thanks, everybody. That's it. I'll be back here next week with a very special episode of our podcast when I will be counting down. Kevin will be Casey Kasem next week, counting down the top podcasts of the year and sharing my lessons from the top 5 from last year. That's next week. Have a great day. Have a great holiday. Merry Christmas. We'll see you all soon.